Well, good morning again. I do have a picture to share with you of Pastor Jim and Loida. They're having a very fun time in Hawaii. I actually spoke to him on the phone on Thursday. I texted him and said, I'm setting up your sermons for the next 3 weeks. If you have an opinion about what I say, call me. Otherwise, don't. And he did call me. Turns out he has an opinion. Imagine that. They're actually getting ready to fly home now, and he'll be back in the office this week, and we'll be back preaching next Sunday. But they have had a very restful time away together with their family. So this weekend, we're getting ready to start a new sermon series, and we're going to be spending the next 4 weeks talking about the Wesley Challenge. And we are basing it off of this book by Chris Flomsby. It was our inspiration for this sermon series. And we decided on this topic for a few reasons. And before I talk about those reasons, though, I do want to let you know what Wesley's 21 questions are, because I don't think everybody is familiar with Wesley and his 21 questions. And for those of you who don't know, when I say Wesley, I am referring to John Wesley, the founder of the Methodist Church. And for those of you who want to know more about John Wesley, have you heard that we're offering short-term discipleship classes? We can't sign up next door anymore, but there is information in your newsletter about how to sign up. And we have a 2-week class offered by Pastor Harold Hendren on the Methodist Church and about John Wesley. So I encourage you to take a look at that and to sign up for that class if that's one that you're interested in. But anyways, back in 1729, John Wesley was a young man. He was a college student, and he was at Oxford in England, and he decided he was going to start a club with his brother Charles. Now, these club members, he gathered some other men who were kind of like-minded like he was, and they were very religious or very holy, and they wanted to have this club that did some different things. They were going to ask themselves 21 questions every day because they wanted to make sure that they were living their lives in the right way. So they asked themselves 21 questions every day. They fasted on Wednesdays and Fridays until 3 p.m. They made sure that they received Holy Communion at least once a week. They studied and discussed the Greek New Testament and other Christian classics every single evening in a member's room. And after they had met for about a year, they started to visit prisoners and the sick. You know, stuff that guys usually do when they go off to college. Not really. Even back in 1729, that was a little bit extreme behavior. Or not extreme behavior, but not your regular college guy behavior. And their friends or their peers actually started to make fun of them for their holy behavior, and they started to tease them and call them the Holy Club. And I love John Wesley because he's like, yeah, so what? And they took the name, the Holy Club. They just embraced that, and so they became the Holy Club. So that's a brief history of the origin of the Holy Club and the questions. Now, Jim's going to take the next 3 weeks to talk about the questions, and we're actually dividing them into 7 sets of 3, and we're going to give you the questions on cards each week. And the sets are divided up because one set of 7 is going to be about your relationship with God, and the other set of 7 is going to be questions about your relationship with yourselves. And the third set of 7 is going to be about your relationship with others. And so that's what Jim's going to do for the next 3 weeks. But I want to spend today talking about why we decided to do this sermon series. So a few months ago, some of the members of the church took a test. And a few years ago, some of the members of the church took the same test. It's a survey or a test called Natural Church Development, and it's something that we actually do about every 3 years. And this survey measures the 8 vital signs of a healthy church. And the idea is that we're only as strong as our weakest factor. So the example that they use is they use this example of a barrel. And if you want to fill your barrel up with water, and the slats in the barrel are the factors, if your weakest factor is the shortest slat, you can only fill water up to that weakest factor. And then the water starts to roll out. So the idea is you want to make that weakest factor stronger. So the very first time we took the survey, our minimum factor was holistic small groups. Holistic small groups was our week one. So when I started at Lake Deaton, guess what I did? I came in going, I'm excited about small groups. And that's the drum I've been beating since I got here, and I really am passionate about small groups. Not just because it was our weakest factor, but because I really think that community, small group community is important, especially in a large church, because I worked at Summerhill, and I can see that it's needed so much. So then we took the test again a couple of months ago, and guess what? Holistic small groups moved up, so that moved up, but now there's another lowest factor. And our new lowest factor is an interesting one. It's passionate spirituality. That's an interesting one, because what in the world is that? Passionate spirituality. First, I want to tell you what it's not. It's not about how we worship. It's not about if we hold our hands up when we worship. It's not about if we do contemporary worship or blended worship or traditional worship. It's not about if we have a band or if we don't have a band, or if we have an organ, if we have a piano, if there's a guitar up here. It's not about any of those things. It's not about how we pray. It's not about if you can eloquently pray out loud. It's not about how many Bible verses you have memorized or how many classes you have attended. It's not about how long you've been a Christian. It's not about any of those things. It's not about the stuff that you know. What it's about is it's about being rooted in your relationship with God and being able to connect to that relationship in everything that you do. So I want us to stop for a moment, and I want us to think about the word passionate. So, for example, I bet there's a lot of you out there who are passionate about football. I'm not, but I think there's a game coming up. I've seen on the news that this player may or may not have something wrong with his hand. He's wearing gloves all the time. I think there's a game today. I have no idea. Super Bowl's sometime in February. But you guys, some of you are super passionate about it, and you're like dying that I don't know the details. I'm passionate about public education, especially elementary school. So we all have things that we're like so passionate about that if somebody walked up to you and wanted to talk to you about it, you could talk and talk and talk and talk and talk about it. So we should all understand what passion is. Something like you could just like talk about forever, and man, you just get fired up about it. But the point is that we're supposed to have passionate spirituality. So again, passionate spirituality is about being rooted in our relationship with God and being able to connect to that in everything that we do. So the Holy Club, Wesley and the Holy Club, they had passionate spirituality. They were passionate about their relationship with God. They made sure that they were attending to their relationship with God. They were going to church once a week because you had to go to church to get communion. So they were going to church, and they were studying the Greek New Testament and classic Christian literature. So they were doing Bible studies. They were also asking themselves the 21 questions. And after a time, they were so moved by their relationship with God that it wasn't just enough for them to study. They wanted to go out in the world, and they started to visit prisoners and visit the sick. So they were attending to their relationship. They had passionate spirituality. They were all in for God. So the question becomes, how do we do that? How do we get to that place? So this week, when I was working on my sermon, I was using my Wesley Study Bible, and I was kind of but I was trying to find a great definition for the word spirituality, and like, what does that mean? And I was reading the notes in the Bible down at the bottom, and it says this about Christian spirituality. It says, the heart of Christian spirituality and the basis of Christian mission is communion with Jesus and a mutual indwelling. So the heart of Christian spirituality is communion with Jesus, a mutual indwelling. So interesting. Maybe we should see what Jesus has to say about this relationship, about this mutual indwelling. So I'm going to read from the book of John, chapter 15, verses 1 through 8. Hear these words. I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine grower. He removes every branch in me that bears no fruit. Every branch that bears fruit, he prunes to make it bear more fruit. You have already been cleansed by my word that I have spoken to you. Abide in me as I abide in you. Just as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine and you are the branches. Those who abide in me and I in them bear much fruit, because apart from me you can do nothing. Whoever does not abide in me is thrown away like a branch and withers. Such branches are gathered and thrown into the fire and burned. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask for whatever you wish and it will be done for you. My Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit and become my disciples. So this is one of Jesus' favorite ways to teach. He's talking to people who are farmers, and so he's using their language. They would all have known what a vineyard was, and so they can clearly understand what he's saying. But I think that we can understand this too. This is something that we can understand. We understand that a grapevine grows out of the ground, the roots are down in the ground, the grapevine grows out, and then the branches grow off of the grapevine, and the branch has to be attached to the vine, and then the fruit grows off of the branch. However, if the branch is detached, no fruit can grow. There's no chance. There's no chance that fruit can grow on that vine if it's detached. And if it detaches and attaches and detaches and attaches, no chance it's going to grow. It has to stay attached to the vine. The branch must be attached to the vine. Again, verses 4 and 5. Again, abide in me. This is what Jesus is saying. Abide in me as I abide in you. Just as a branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine and you are the branches. Those who abide in me and I in them bear much fruit, because apart from me you can do nothing. So how do we abide in Jesus? Is it just coming to church on Sunday? Is it just about studying about Jesus? Is it just about getting in a small group and doing a whole lot of Bible studies? I don't think so, because if that was it, then when our factor of holistic small groups goes up, passionate spirituality should go up with it. But small groups went up, and passionate spirituality became our minimum factor. Don't get me wrong, though. Bible studies, small group, church, those are really important things. Very important things. I highly encourage all of them. Look at the Holy Club. They were doing those things. But there's something more. There's something more that we're supposed to be doing. There's something more that we have to do to be attached to the vine. A few months ago, we read this book. Some of us read this book. Not all of us read this book, but some of us read this book. And some of us had very passionate feelings about this book. Some of us have very, very passionate feelings about this book. But I want to share an excerpt from it because I think it helps to illustrate my point. It helps to illustrate what I'm trying to say. This book is a class meeting by Kevin Watson. And a class meeting is also a Wesley-type small group. It's what the Methodist Church did in the early years of the Methodist Church. And they didn't just do Bible studies. This is what they did in their groups. Okay, so this is what Kevin Watson said. Imagine a person who sets a goal to run a marathon. They might spend time researching the best kind of running shoes to wear, the best shorts, the best approach to training, the healthiest food to eat. They might subscribe to Runner's World and even read it. But no matter what else they do, there is one thing that is absolutely essential to being able to run a marathon: running. A person can research and buy all the gear that they want, but if they don't actually start running, they are not making real progress towards completing a marathon. It is that simple. I am worried that our approach to Christian discipleship is too often like a person who prepares to run a marathon by buying shoes without actually running in them. Please don't misunderstand me. Just as good running shoes are essential for long-distance running, the Bible and church are essential for discipleship. Discipleship, however, is about a way of life, not only for the mind. Disciples follow Jesus. If you will, disciples are passionate about Jesus. And you can't get passionate about something unless you're really running the race. So that's really a lot to think about. It's really a lot to think about. So last week I talked about the core values and about how they're about how we behave, how we are supposed to behave. And we talked about how they are how we're going to achieve our mission and our vision. And we talked about how spiritual growth is the most important one. But I think too often we get stuck on just spiritual growth. And we only do that core value. Or we do that core value in one other. They're all important. Last week I decided to go to the Bible with a purpose. And I've decided that I'm going to spend the next couple of months reading the Gospels and looking for the core values, looking for examples in the stories that Jesus told of people who had the core values. And just in 1 week of reading, I have read so many stories that Jesus told of people who not just had one core value or two core values, but people who had all 6 of the core values. I'm not counting the Bible study, the Bible spiritual growth core value. All 6 core values. The Bible is full of stories of people who have hospitality, who are invitational, who are generous, who are caring, who are serving each other, and they're doing it all in community. It's all over the place. So I think in order to get passionate spirituality, in order to be rooted in our relationship with God, to be able to connect to that in all that we do, to use the illustration, that we have to buy the running shoes, that we have to read the magazine, that we have to get the clothes, that we have to have all this stuff, but we also have to run the race. We have to do all of the core values. We have to study the Bible. We have to attend church, but we also have to make sure that we're attending to the matters of the heart. We have to start asking ourselves the 21 questions, because the questions are what are going to get us starting to run. The questions are what are going to get us to start to do the core values in our lives. And yes, I think we need to consider the questions in community, because in small groups, change happens best. We change better when we do it together. So I invite you to join Pastor Jim and myself in the next 3 weeks as we start the 21-day challenge to develop new habits that will maybe change the way that we abide in Jesus Christ.